Hello! In this video, we are going to talk about a few things we should all consider before making a request to an instructor. To help you throughout this video, we have given you a worksheet. On this worksheet, you can follow along with the video and answer the questions. Important, there will be a quiz at the end of this video. When making a request, you should consider: who are you talking to? How important is the request? And how well do you know this person? These three questions will help determine what request you should use with your instructor. Who are you talking to? In English, depending on the person and your relationship with them, you will use different requests. For example, I use different requests for when I am talking to my roommate than when I am talking to my instructor. Because I have a different relationship with my roommate than I do with my instructor, I will usually use different requests with them. The next thing to consider is, how important is the request? This one is important because in the US, the more important the request, the more polite speakers will usually be. Think about the types of requests on the left. For each of these requests, you might say something different. You probably would not ask for more time on a paper in the same way that you would order coffee at a cafe. The size of the request usually helps determine how we will make the request. So, if you were asking for more time on a paper, you might say something like, I was wondering if I could get an extension on my paper. But if you were ordering coffee at a cafe, you might say something like, could I have a cup of coffee? Notice that I didn't use the same request for each scenario. We'll talk more about this later. Now we are going to use the worksheet. Click pause to stop the video. Go to worksheet section 1.1 and answer the questions. When you are finished with the worksheet, click play to start the video again. All right, answers. Asking a professor for more time on a paper is a very big request, so it's number 1. Asking your roommate to wash their dishes is not as important as asking for more time on a paper, so it's number 2. And finally, ordering coffee at a cafe is the least important request, so it's number 3. The final thing to consider is, how well do you know the instructor? Just like with all people in our lives, how well we know someone will help us decide what request we use. On the left, here are some questions to consider before making a request to an instructor. Have you had a few classes with the instructor? Have you attended the instructor's office hours before? Do you feel like you have a good relationship with the instructor? These questions can help us decide how polite we should be when making a request. Let's apply what we've learned. Let's read the following 3 paragraphs together and think about how this information is related to what we just learned. Remember, we should consider: who are we talking to, how important is the request, and how well do you know the instructor. Number 1. Student Nicole Brown has been an average student, has missed a few classes, and has not completed all of her homework. Number 2, she is applying for a scholarship that will help her pay her tuition next term. Number 3, she is making the request to her instructor. Together, let's match the information about Nicole to the 3 things we should consider when making a request to an instructor. All right, who are you talking to should match up with number 3. Number 2, how important is the request, should match up with number 2. Notice that Nicole's request is really important. Receiving a scholarship to help pay her tuition would really help Nicole in her studies. And finally, number 3, how well do you know this person, should match up with number 1. Now, let's think about some request strategies we can use with the new information we just learned. Think about the 2 sentences below. Get me a cup of coffee, and could I have a cup of coffee? Which one feels more polite to you? All right, Click pause to stop the video. Go to worksheet section 1.2 and answer the questions. When you are finished with the worksheet, click play to start the video again. If you chose "Could I get a cup of coffee" as the most polite request, you're right. Requests in English are made up of direct and indirect requests. Look at the two sentences you wrote about on your worksheet. The first one, "Get me a cup of coffee," is considered a direct request because it is an imperative command. Direct requests usually use fewer words than indirect requests. They are usually less polite. They are usually a command, and they are not used when talking to instructors. The second sentence we looked at was, "Could I get a cup of coffee?" This sentence is an indirect request because it is a question that uses a modal verb, could. Indirect requests usually use more words than direct requests, and they are more polite than direct requests. Indirect requests are also usually a question and are used when talking to instructors. And they are also used when making important requests. You should use indirect request when making a request to an instructor. Let's look at a few examples of direct and indirect requests. Think for a moment. When would it be appropriate to use a direct request? For me, I use direct request when I am talking to my dog Wesley. This is Wesley. Now, if I want Wesley to sit down, I might say something like, "Wesley, sit." That's a direct request. But I would never say something like, "Wesley, I was wondering if it would be possible for you to sit down." That's an indirect request. Now, if I'm talking to an instructor, I should always use indirect requests. On the left are a few examples of direct requests. A direct request is less polite and is not a question. Sometimes a direct request is a command and starts with a verb like, "Give me an extension on my paper." Also, we see sentences that have modals like must or should. They sound more like a demand. We don't want to sound demanding when we make a request. Finally, sentences that have need or want, those are also very direct. On the right, there are indirect requests. These are more polite. All of these requests are questions. They are indirect because they do not make a demand like a direct request does. For example, "Can I get an extension on my paper?" is more polite than "I need an extension on my paper." But when talking to instructors, use could. Could is more polite than can. Some other indirect requests include, "I was wondering if I could get an extension on my paper." "Is it possible to get an extension on my paper?" These requests are considered very polite. You can use them when talking to instructors. All right, click pause to stop the video. Go to worksheet section 1.3 and answer the questions. When you are finished with the worksheet, click play to start the video again. And here are the answers. As you can see, the indirect requests have modals, like here could, or here would, or they have really polite phrases like "I was wondering." The direct requests, they have statements like need, or an imperative like give, or a sentence like want, as in "I want a chocolate bar." All right, now let's practice. We are going to read a situation where a student wants more time to do a paper. While we read, think about the request that the student uses. Is it polite or impolite? Direct or indirect? Okay, let's read the information right here. Zach needs an extension on his paper that is due tomorrow in Dr. Sidorenko's class. Let's read the conversation together. Zach: "Hello, Dr. Sidorenko. How are you?" "I'm fine, Zach. How are you?" I wish I was better, but I have a pretty big problem with my paper. Oh, what's the problem? Well, I stayed up too late working on a different assignment. I want some more time to work on the paper that's due tomorrow in class. Ah, I see. Great. Now let's look at another example of a student asking for more time on a paper. Okay, let's read the next conversation together. Leah has come to Dr. Walters' office hours to ask for an extension on a paper that is due tomorrow. Let's read the conversation. Hi, Dr. Walters. Have a seat, Leah. How are you doing? I'm doing okay. How are you? Great. I'm fine. Good, good. What can I do for you? Well, I wanted to talk about the paper that's due tomorrow. I was just hoping that I could get an extension on it for a few days or for a week or so. A week? Now, click pause to stop the video. Go to worksheet section 1.4 and answer the questions. When you are finished with the worksheet, click play to start the video again. All right, here are the answers. Number 1. Zach uses the request, I want some more time to work on the paper. Number 2. The request is very direct. And number 3. The request is impolite. Zach uses a very direct request when talking to Dr. Sidorenko. It sounds more like a demand, and it isn't phrased like a question. Now, let's look at Leah. Number 1, Leah said, I was just hoping that I could get an extension on it for a few days or for a week or so. Number 2, the request is indirect. And number 3, the request seems pretty polite. Leah uses an indirect request when talking to Dr. Walters. All right, quiz time. Click pause to stop the video. Go to worksheet section 1.5 and answer the questions. When you are finished with the worksheet, click play to start the video again. All right, let's check your answers. Number 1, give an example of an indirect request. Sentences with any of the following work just fine. Can I? Could I? I was wondering if I could. Is it possible to? Would you be willing? Number 2, give an example of a direct request. Sentences with any of the following work just fine. Give me, I am asking, I must, you should, I want, I need. Number 3, answer C, an indirect request. Number 4, answer C, a direct request. And number 5, answer D. I was wondering if there is any chance that I could get an extension on my paper. Thanks for watching this video, everybody. Have fun making requests.